The following episode of the Milcam Sessions contains mature subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
In episode 6 of the Milcam Sessions, we explore 3 cursed tales. A movie condemned to never see the light of day because 6 actors who were set to star in it ended up dead. We have the sad and haunting tale of Fritz the Dummy. Is Fritz the vessel for the creator who suffered a violent end? But first, he scored the Stanley Cup winning goal for his childhood team, only to disappear for 11 years afterward. Was there really a curse of Bill Barilko?
The last goal he ever scored won the Leafs the cup. They didn't win another till 1962. Lyrics from the song 50 Mission Cap by iconic Canadian rock band The Tragically Hip. Lyrics that perfectly encapsulate the curse of Bill Barilko. The man who would go on to be known as Bashin' Bill Barilko was born on March 27, 1921, in the small town of Timmins, Ontario. For as long as anyone could remember, Bill dreamed of donning the iconic blue and white of his favorite team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Oddly, however, he did not learn the essential skill of skating until he was in his teens. Fortunately for Bill, it was a skill he picked up quickly. In 1947, while playing for the California Wolves of the Pacific Coast Hockey League, Bill was given a chance for his childhood dream to come true, when he was called up to play for, you guessed it, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Bill's point totals were modest, with his highest being 17, 10 goals, 7 assists, during the playing season of 1949 to 1950. Bill made up for the modest production with his physical play, earning him the nickname Bashin' Bill Barilko, with his highest penalty minute total being 147 during the 1947-48 season. The NHL playoffs, however, are a time when unexpected heroes emerge, and during the 1951 Stanley Cup Final against the rival Montreal Canadiens in overtime, Bashin' Bill Barilko would score the game winner, the biggest, and unbeknownst to everyone at the time, the last goal Bill would ever score, as Bill Barilko would disappear that very summer. 4 months after celebrating the thrill of scoring the overtime goal to clinch a 4th Stanley Cup, having won previously in 1947, 48, and 49, Bill Barilko embarked on a fishing trip to James Bay. Tragically, this would be the last time the man known as Bashin' would be seen alive, and his whereabouts would remain a mystery for 11 years. In the years after Bill Barilko's disappearance, the Leafs were mired in a Stanley Cup drought, which fans connected to the disappearance of their overtime hero from 1951. In 1962, the story of Bill Barilko and the fortune of his beloved Toronto Maple Leafs would take an interesting turn, as that year the wreckage of the plane carrying Bill Barilko and pilot Henry Hudson would be found. Prior to the discovery of the missing plane, a wild story sprang up, which claimed that the pontoons of the float plane were weighed down with gold, smuggled by the occupants. However, upon finding the wreckage, this was proven to be untrue. The wreckage was found in the dense northern Ontario wilderness, about 100 kilometers north of Cochrane, Ontario, on June 7, 1962. When a helicopter pilot happened to spot the wreckage while flying in the area, which was also 56 kilometers off the pilot's planned flight path. Eerily, Bill Barilko's mother, Faye, refused to wish her son farewell on this journey, as she didn't want him to leave. Call it mother's intuition, but maybe Faye knew that this journey was doomed from the start. Mother's intuition or not, the guilt of not saying goodbye to her son would haunt Faye for the rest of her life. Discovering the wreckage of the float plane, while tragic, allowed for Bill Barilko to be laid to rest and provide closure for his family, teammates, friends, and fans. Not only did Bill Barilko's story receive its final chapter, but his beloved Toronto Maple Leafs were able to win the Stanley Cup that year with a 2-1 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. The curse of Bill Barilko had been lifted, and the Leafs would go on to win 3 more Stanley Cups, their last to date in 1967. To this day, a black and white photo of a smiling, bashing Bill Barilko hangs inside of a lounge at the Maple Leafs home arena, Air Canada Centre, forever capturing the moment when a boy from a small town in Ontario was able to live out his childhood dream, as so many other kids imagined in their driveways, scoring a Stanley Cup winning goal for his childhood team. I will end this story the same way I began it, with the lyrics from 50 Mission Cap. The last goal he ever scored won the Leafs the cup.
And we are back. Miller, thank you for bringing the Bill Barilko story to my attention.
Oh, I'm really glad that you enjoyed it, because we had a bit of banter for our listeners, in case you're curious. Because when I posed this story to Cam, he said that he was gonna, if he wasn't into it, he was gonna challenge me on it, and and I'm actually curious. So it's weird that it's my story, and I'm gonna field the first question. But what about the story got you hooked? Because you did kind of seem on the fence when I first told you about it.
Let me think. So I think in general, I am a bit more skeptical about curses. Part of me wonders, like, oh, how do you know it's a curse, and how do you know it's not a coincidence? I find them interesting, though, and I find them compelling, but the bar is pretty high to convince me. And just, something about this story, so I think one thing to mention is I had no clue that the Leafs actually won Stanley Cups back in the day.
Well, I mean, they had to win games. I don't think they've ever had a 0-win season.
But I was like, okay, there's a curse that the Leafs aren't going to win the Stanley Cup, and I'm like, and is that thing going on like, decades later? Like, or is it possible the team just, not to offend any Leafs fans, like I don't want to say they suck, but they've had a very bad streak for decades. For any like non-hockey fans, they haven't won since, I believe, the 60s.
1967.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, okay, so how do we know it's related to Bill Barilko passing? And how do we know it's not just, other factors like the team management, funding, etc. But I found it so compelling that they had won in 4 different Stanley Cups in the 40s, and I guess one in the 60s as well. And
it went between the 40s and the 40s and the 50s, because
Go ahead, man. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna. No, it's okay. Because the last one that included Bill was in 1951, and then yeah. So, but I know the timeline's confusing. But I knew that the Leafs were just historically competitive at a time, for a time, because my dad was actually a Leafs fan, and he wanted me to be a Leafs fan, but as you know, I'm a fan of the Pittsburgh Penguins and then later the Golden Knights as well. But the reason why is because I actually saw Mario Lemieux on Hockey Night in Canada, and I was like, I like that guy. And I think it was because of, Mario and Mario Brothers or Super Mario, right? So
yeah.
But no,
I was the same way too. I also had a cat named Mario.
See? It's the thing. Yeah. Touches generations, man. Nintendo and hockey and felines. But my dad would tell me about when he would watch it as a kid. And that's how he said that he grew up as a Leafs fan, just because, they were considered Ontario's team. And for a long period, they were, because they didn't have the Senators until the early 1990s. And I'd still say they are.
Sorry, Peter beeping.
All good. I was going to ask about that.
So yeah, as a person living in Toronto, they're important for us here as well. And yeah, I guess like as a casual hockey fan myself, it's it's always been interesting because I hear people who um, they talk poorly about the Leafs, and but they also have like diehard fans. Like I have a friend who's a Leafs fan, and almost to the point where it's like he's the one cursed. Like he's like his morale is so low, and like it's almost like this self defeatist attitude now, and it's like they can't give up. And I think they were doing, what was it, last year the Leafs were actually doing kind of okay, and then like older Leafs fans are like, you are not allowed to become a fan of the Leafs right now. You have to suffer for uh, 20 business years if you want to meet
If
the
you want to
grace
join the
period.
bandwagon.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, I'm a diehard hockey fan. Like, you know that. I've even got you to watch Stanley Cup games with me and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, like, the Leafs were doing well in the last 10 years or so. They were making the playoffs. They could just never get past it. And I don't think that's a curse. What it is
No.
it's just, it comes down to management. And like, I only want to touch on this briefly because I could literally do a separate episode just about this, even though it has nothing to do with like horror or like, or true crime. But the Leafs' big problem is they have an executive who's basically the owner of the Leafs through Rogers Communications. And he's the one who's involved in making a lot of these decisions, even though he has no knowledge of hockey whatsoever. So it's basically having a driver, with a blindfold on in a car when they're trying to run the team right now. But
Mm.
obviously, the thing with Bill Barilko is like, you're right. One of the things you brought up to me was it could be a coincidence. And yeah, it very well could be. But it does seem very interesting that they have all this success, and the last goal Bill ever scores is the one that wins them the Stanley Cup in 1951. And then they literally just come nowhere close to that for the 11 years it took for them to find his body. And I just thought that was very interesting, just because who knew that, a potential Stanley Cup hero could cause so much turmoil for their same beloved team, whether they knowingly or unknowingly did it, with the fact that his body was still missing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find it really interesting. Like the timing is pretty wild. That they win right after they find his body. So I think that was, it convinced me that, hey, this is pretty weird and what's going on. I think if I wanted to put on my skeptic hat, I could say, well, it gave the team a morale boost that year, and they were just so happy to finally have closure about Bill that, maybe the team also thought, let's win this for Bill. We know what happened now. We can put him to rest, and let's honor him by giving him this win.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely would have played a part. I would think that knowing that he's been found and wanting to win for him is definitely a possibility. It is definitely the timeline where
Mm.
it seems cursed. Just knowing that this one Stanley Cup hero, like, basically just did the most incredible thing. Because I picture it like my son, the same way. He always shoots pucks on the driveway, on the road, and what have you. And I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's thinking, one day I want to be, in a Stanley Cup final and score this huge goal for my team. And to know that it's the team you grew up loving, like, that's just awesome. Like, it's such a special thing that he got to do. But then having it end so tragically, but also come full circle within that 11-year period. Like, yeah, I was always interested in it because I had heard the Tragically Hip song, but I didn't really know that it was a real story because it came out, I think, in like 1992. So
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid and didn't really know much about it. But then there's a really great show. It's Canadian run, just called Urban Legends. They ran through 2 or 3 seasons, I think. And it was like three stories, and it was your job to guess which one of them was an actual true story versus two fabricated tales.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that was a Canadian show. I do
yeah,
remember it.
yeah, that one's it was produced in Canada, and then it ran on History Channel, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at least from when it used to be on. But and one of the stories they covered was the story of Bill Barilko. And when I found out it was true, I was like, wow, that is wild.
Mm.
And to know that the disappearance of somebody, at least at that time, and finding his body inspired a song that came along, 40 years later, because it would have had such an impact on Gord Downie and rest in peace, Gord Downie, by the way. He was a fantastic musician, and I got to
Yeah.
see the Tragically Hip live a few times too. So
No, actually, reading about this story and listening to the song that you were referencing had me re-listening to a few Tragically Hip songs, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't listen to them enough, but they were, hugely talented. Definitely a staple for 90s alternative music.
and if anybody's wondering if you haven't heard them and you're outside of Canada, just think, I view the Tragically Hip as kind of like Canada's answer to REM, in that kind of
Oh,
similar indie rock style in a way. It just kind of, that's how I get it. Like, how do you feel about that?
I think that's appropriate. Like you could call them REH in a way. Yeah, I feel like, when everything was going on with Gord Downie's cancer diagnosis, I tried to get into them a bit more. But for whatever reason, I think the songs that the algorithm was showing me, like they were good, but like I think I needed to hear some of the like older stuff.
Mhm.
Like I really respected what he was doing for Indigenous rights, and it was just like such an inspiring story. But I think like I never got into Bob Cajun that much, and then I was like, you know what, this is a band that I really respect, and maybe I'll check out later. But it wasn't like doing it that much for me. But then
Fair.
hearing this song, and then um, when like YouTube auto plays some other songs, I was like, oh, they're like early '90s songs were like really freaking good. like so it was reminding me of tunes that I would listen to uh, on the bus, because I had a little portable radio when I was growing up. Instead of I didn't have an MP3 player, I just had like a radio. So I listened to like the Winnipeg radio stations, and I was like, oh yeah, this song, this is one of the Power 97 staples that they would play. So it was a bit of nostalgia for me, but it was really good. And I was looking at how much their output was. Like they have quite a few albums, and I was like, yeah, okay, you know, it's it's just like that. Sometimes you need to realize that sometimes you'll hear a band or an artist, and you'll think, I don't know if this is doing it that much for me, but you'll randomly come back to them like a year or so later, and it'll just hit really well differently.
The thing, it's all about a right time, right place thing. Like, there are certain bands that I hadn't been a fan of, and I'm talking for years. And then you just hear the right song at the right time. Like,
Mm.
I'll give an example. Like, these bands are not connected in any way, but I was never a fan of the band Every Time I Die up until about 2012, because they had a song on the NHL soundtrack. See, I can tie it in. It's hockey related. The
I'll
NHL,
allow it.
the EA Sports NHL soundtrack for that year had a song called El Dorado by Every Time I Die, and I was like, oh, this is really good, and it just
Mm.
hit perfectly, and that's what got me into it. But as for the Tragically Hip, like, my mom played them a lot. She really enjoyed their older stuff, and then my favorite album from them, I think it came out in '97. It's called Trouble in the Hen House, and
Oh.
it has a low key banger on it called 700-Foot Ceiling. And I was so upset when they had their last concert televised that they never played it. I was literally Homer, like he was with with BTO. Like,
No
no
new
new
crap.
crap, play 700-Foot Ceiling now, and they never did. I was so disappointed. But, but the show itself was fantastic. But yeah, um, and Cam will make sure, because he's the one who edits this, because blind guys make terrible editors. But we're gonna make sure to put the link to 50 Mission Cap in the description,
Yes.
just so if anyone wants to hear it, they can. Because seriously, the Tragically Hip were fantastic storytellers, and that's kind of why I tie them in to the indie alt rock, or even like some elements of folk rock scene, because they were fantastic storytellers through their music, and they did a great job with 50 Mission Cap. So I was curious. I know this didn't turn out to be true, but when you were reading the story and listening to it, what did you think about the potential rumor that Bill Barilko and the pilot were smuggling gold?
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next question. Where did that come from?
It's a thing. I've just heard that it was speculation through the rumor mill in the area when they disappeared. Like, my understanding is just it's basically to try to make the story more compelling, because you think, oh, it's like Bill Barilko, he was this outlaw on the ice and was known for his brutal hits. So they would think, well, why wouldn't he be like this crazy country outlaw who would say he was going on a fishing trip, but actually turns out that he's a gold smuggler?
But why gold though? Like, why not cash? It kind of gives an air pirate vibe a bit.
Kind of does. I mean, I guess they could have also went with cash, or with with adult substances. That's another option too.
Adult substances.
Say that because we don't want to get messed up. I mean, it could very well just be MJ, which would be fine, but still.
Yeah.
And we're not talking. Well, we are talking about Mary Jane, but not from Spider-Man. Even though I'm sure Cam probably could. Yeah. But I think gold almost romanticizes it, where it's like he was a hero and he could still be a hero, because it kind of gives me, like, that rumor gives me a total Old West vibe, of like people who would find gold in like a canyon and they would steal it and then try to get away from like a Southern sheriff in a way. So
yeah,
I don't know. I wish I found more information about it, but I just think it's one of those things where, it's 1950s. Sensationalism was pretty big even then. So, what makes a story more compelling? It's like, oh, a guy disappeared on a fishing trip. Did he disappear on a fishing trip? I heard he went and tried to steal gold and the plane went down.
Or like maybe it's possible that he was added so that it was extra incentive for people to go looking for him in the wilderness.
That too,
like,
yeah.
If you find him and you find some gold, no one will notice if he takes some of that gold or.
What do you mean? There was no gold there.
I didn't see any gold. Well, they didn't find any gold with him. maybe
so yeah, maybe somebody took it as well. Oh,
it's like some guy in Cochrane, Ontario, is just suddenly much more wealthy.
You just see him being like, let's just say it moved me to a bigger house.
I wanted to also ask about his mom, because that was kind of spooky too, and I think that was a bit of an element that made me think, okay, what was going on here? Like was there some kind of curse? Like, were the Montreal Canadiens using like black magic or voodoo, and it just somehow latched onto Bill? Because his mom Faye somehow just got this intuition, and I find intuitions very interesting. Like when people don't have really a good explanation and they just feel something's off, or there's like a near miss. Like I'm sure if he had listened to his mother, then he could have avoided this entirely. So I guess this is a we're not advocating for listening to your mother, but if you want to, go ahead.
I mean, sometimes they mean well, but yeah. I don't know if we want to get into that one.
We're neutral on the mother front. If you're an adult, yes, use your judgment. If you're a child, you should listen. This is getting overly convoluted, but sorry. What were your thoughts on his mother's premonition or intuition that she was having?
Well, that's the thing. It's again one of the elements of the story I wish I got more information for, because it could very well be that she did have intuition. That's kind of why I put that in, because my first thought was, yeah, she must be thinking there could be something wrong with the plane. Um, remember back in, the 1940s, 1950s, air travel wasn't really as refined, I guess, for lack of a better word, as it is today, and as technologically advanced. So if you didn't understand it, especially when you're not going on like um, an airline from a carrier, say, like I don't know, I don't want to say professional because it doesn't sound right, but,
Right.
like a more nationally recognized brand, like I wonder if she would have had the same thoughts if, say, he was boarding like an Air Canada flight. I would, because I'm not a fan of Air Canada, but I won't get into that. But also, I'm curious if Faye maybe had some other type of experience on a plane herself that didn't go well, or if it was just a genuine intuition. I know for me, the hardest thing, and this is kind of a discussion that I have with my own son, it's stories like this that make me realize that communication is very important. If you have a special thing that you haven't said to somebody that you care about, make sure that you say it, because you just never know, if you don't take that chance, then you may never get it again. Like, I'm not trying to come across as morbid or anything, but
Right.
you know you don't want to live with regrets like that, because sure, if Faye would have taken a moment to say goodbye to her son, like, she still would have lost him, which obviously is very unfortunate and tragic, but she also wouldn't have had to carry that guilt for the rest of her life of not saying goodbye, because at the end of the day, she lost her son and she never had that chance to say goodbye and get that closure. Because you'll have disagreements, right? Like in your family, whether it's with a parent, with a sibling, what have you. But it's very important just to, say your true feelings, especially if they're, something you want to make sure they know and carry with them, right? So
Yeah.
that honestly for me was heartbreaking. And I'm glad that the research I found included that detail, because that was something I wasn't aware of before.
I think, yeah, it's a detail that adds a lot of weight to the story, and it's an interesting detail as well. But yeah, I thanks for letting me know about this, because I'm not a huge hockey guy, but whenever, well, essentially, if it's a good story, it's a good story, and like this one just drew me right in. So your encyclopedic knowledge of all things curses and Canadian really came in clutch here.
I don't know if I have encyclopedic knowledge, but I appreciate that.
You definitely do on certain topics. So just kind of remembering this from like urban legends, and it's kind of a good way of finding just really interesting cases that otherwise we might not hear about. So it's the compliment that is being served to you.
I appreciate that. It's a very nice compliment, and I will take it because it is complimentary.
Nice.
But no, and I like that the end of the article that I found too mentions that there's the black and white photo of Bash and Bill Barilko that's still part of Leafs lore. In the arena at the aforementioned Air Canada Center. But uh, just capturing that moment when when the boy from the small town is able to score the biggest goal of his life for his childhood team. Like, I love that. That part was a way, to make it kind of come full circle. And that's why I wrote the story with the lyrics from 50 Mission Cap and then ended it with the lyrics of 50 Mission Cap. I kind of wanted to bookend it that way because I just felt like it's sad, it's tragic, but it's also triumphant is kind of what I was going for. So I hope that came across to you and also to our fellow listeners.
Oh, I think it definitely came across that way, and yeah, his legacy continues on through his photo, the song, and even us just discussing him.
And it works out too that right now is the Stanley Cup playoffs is this time of year, so I figured it was the best time to do it. Unfortunately for Leafs fans, but I know you already know that you guys didn't make it this year, but you've got a number one pick, so you can kind of start rebuilding, which is good, but just hopefully make better management and roster construction decisions. Because, like, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a Leafs fan, but that said, for the sheer novelty of the Leafs winning the Stanley Cup, I do want to see that at least once in my lifetime, just to see like what would happen in Toronto. Because you guys don't seem like the type that would riot, but like the celebration would probably be just nothing short of incredible. So I do hope that happens one day, and that I could see it. So I'll give you hopes, Leafs fans. See, I'm a nice guy, right?
You are a nice guy. And yeah, last year we really wanted the Blue Jays to win, and they unfortunately didn't, and it was a little bit sad, even though I don't follow baseball at all. But yeah, I definitely would like to see my home city celebrating in that way. And yeah, maybe I will be a Klingon fan that's like, hey, it's game 6 of the Stanley Cups, and the Stanley Cup and the Leafs are looking pretty good. Maybe I'll become a fan now. Just get everyone to hate me.
It's just, I could just see you like having a Winnipeg Jets jersey with the Simpsons meme and like disappearing into the bush and coming back out with a Leafs jersey on.
Exactly. Go. But I think on that note, we should continue on to my story, the creamy Oreo middle of today's episode, featuring a strange dummy head. So I'll let myself tell that story now. During World War II, between 1943 and 1945, there was a German POW camp known as Stalag 2B. Located in Poland, this camp held over 600 American and Allied soldiers captured by the Germans in the war. The conditions were hellish, with the prisoners being worked to the bone and fed next to nothing. One American POW was Private Billy Booth. He was a former children's entertainer and puppeteer before joining the war effort. To add some levity to the bleak prison conditions, Private Booth used old newspapers soaked in potato starch to construct a sort of papier-mâché material. He then crafted this into a ventriloquist dummy, painting it with pink gloss that a Polish farmer had smuggled to him. The dummy looked a bit rough around the edges, but Private Booth made do and began to put on shows for the other POWs. His bawdy live performances took many of the troops back to simpler times. For a brief while every night, things didn't feel so hopeless. Even some of the sour-faced German guards were seen cracking a smile from time to time at these shows. Private Booth was just that talented. Sadly, the laughter eventually came to an end. In January 1945, a mere 2 weeks before the prison camp was liberated and the prisoners set free, Private Booth, alongside several other POWs, were marched into a field outside the prison. The warden had come to the decision that they were to be made an example of for not working hard enough. They were forced to dig their own graves and then mercilessly shot. When the camp was liberated, Mr. Fritz was recovered. He was stowed away by one of the Allied soldiers and was eventually brought home to America to be given to Private Booth's family. And that's where the story normally would end. However, Mr. Fritz would eventually turn up elsewhere many decades later. His exact history immediately following the war remains a mystery, and it is unclear exactly how long the dummy remained with the Booth family. The explanation of Mr. Fritz's backstory was written out in a small handwritten note kept on the dummy's person as he changed hands over the years before eventually turning up at an antique mall in Myrtle Beach. It's not clear how or even why Mr. Fritz fell out of possession of the Booth family, but it was at this mall where he was scooped up by a World War II military collector from Liverpool, England. The World War II collector, who has decided to remain anonymous, noticed some strange occurrences with the dummy. He had stored Mr. Fritz in a glass display case, but would often find that the door to the case would be ajar in the morning. Sometimes he would even notice that the head had a slightly different expression than it did when it was last touched. The collector tried to consider a rational explanation to these occurrences, but could not find one. He ultimately decided to tape the display case shut to prevent it from opening overnight. However, the tape was found to be peeled back the next day. This creeped his family out considerably, and the World War II collector removed Mr. Fritz from the display case and stored it in his backyard shed. The dummy remained there for several months. However, this ultimately proved to be an insufficient solution, as his children would be terrified by strange laughter coming from the shed. The dummy remained there for several months. However, this ultimately proved to be an insufficient solution, as the collector's children would be terrified by strange laughter coming from the shed when they would go to the backyard to play in the garden. The kids would refuse to step anywhere near the shed, which held this strange, laughing head. Motivated by this unsettling report from his kids, the collector decided to find a new home for this uncanny antique. Enter Michael Diamond. Diamond is a UK-based collector of the strange. His house is home to shrunken heads, paraphernalia used in real executions, an elephant-headed boy from Braiding Waxwork Museum, and even a pair of handcuffs originally owned by Houdini. He keeps all these curious items in one room, which he has playfully dubbed the Freak Room. The World War II collector had seen Diamond's traveling exhibition of oddities during an antiques festival, and decided to give Mr. Fritz to Diamond, thinking he would fit in right at home with the strange curiosities. By this point, the dummy was in a very degraded state. Mr. Fritz no longer had a body and was essentially just a head. The paint on his face is peeling and cracked. Still, Diamond was delighted to have the creepy puppet join the ranks of his collection. He wasn't suspicious that this antique was being freely given to him, as it wasn't exactly uncommon for old dolls or dummies to creep out collectors, resulting in them foisting them off on a new owner in a rush. Storing Mr. Fritz in his freak room, Diamond placed it in a clear glass display case. Early on, little else changed in Diamond's life. However, over the next few weeks, some odd occurrences began to happen. It started with the door on the display case. It would sometimes be found ajar in the morning, with no indication that someone else in the house had disturbed it. Diamond would shut the door firmly, but soon, like clockwork, the door would always be found wide open the next day. Diamond set up a GoPro camera by the display, and sure enough, the door would be seen moving open by itself. Disturbingly, the dummy head itself could also be seen moving, with the lips opening up and down, as if it were trying its best to form words. The eyes, eyebrows, and handle mechanism could also be seen moving, as if by invisible hands. To this day, the head of Mr. Fritz remains within the Diamond household, although Michael Diamond, a purveyor of the weird, has remained comfortable housing the dummy head in his home. His wife couldn't handle the intensely uncomfortable vibes she picked up from the thing after the video was captured. She left the house and refused to return for 3 days. And Diamond's refusal to get rid of the dummy head put a significant strain on their marriage. She even brought her own husband to court in order to compel him to get rid of it. Despite his wife's misgivings, Mr. Fritz remains as a roommate in the Diamond home. His peeled and decaying face continues to reside in the display case in the freak room. However, at the urging of Diamond's wife, the door to the case has an elaborate lock and a pair of thick, intertwining chains to keep it closed at night. A shroud is kept draped over the case when it is not being viewed, keeping Mr. Fritz relatively out of sight and out of mind. Is Mr. Fritz haunted by Private Booth? One last connection to the living world? A connection which he poured his humanity and passion into before his life was mercilessly cut short? Or could Mr. Fritz be cursed by the miasma of dark energy which undoubtedly surrounded the prison camp?
Or could there be a more grounded explanation for the weird occurrences that followed his entries into new antique collections? Or perhaps Mr. Fritz, after all these years, was trying in some way to communicate his desire for a new body?
Okay, we are back from hearing the Mr. Fritz the Dummy story. Miller, what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts of that story?
I'll tell you what my thoughts is.
Don't criticize my diction, man.
Okay, getting back on topic. So I found the story fascinating because I couldn't help it. I would originally tie this into a story like something like Robert the Doll, but the fact that you covered something that I had no familiarity with at all was fantastic. And it was honestly incredible of Private Booth, where you're in the worst possible situation you can be, because we've heard of the stories of prisoners of war camps, concentration camps, etc. during that time, and I mean they're just beyond reproach. Not reproach, sorry. They're just beyond appalling. Like you can't even fathom, unless you've lived through it and survived it, what that was like. And even in such dark times, the fact that he was able to find humor and entertain his fellow troops, and even I like that you said sour, like calling them sauerkraut.
The sour German guards.
German guards, yeah.
I'm sure they were more than sour. I'm sure they were like hateful and vicious. But writing the script, you have to choose adjectives sometimes, and that's what I went with.
Also, sour faced. I just made me think of the lemon tree from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Don't you get it, Springfield? It's over. You lose. Now all this talk has made me hungry.
That's probably their permanent faces, and then
right,
they would see this dummy, and it would be a little bit less like that as they smile.
Yeah, and then just as I'm reading along, like the fact that the way they were executed, it's like it's the end. You're being forced to dig your own graves. That's kind of why I did the intro the way that I did, because the theory that I stick to for the actions of Mr. Fritz is I'm genuinely thinking that Private Booth's spirit is maybe inhabiting the dummy and causing him to act that way, because man, like that would be terrifying if you're not expecting it. Like imagine if you're his kids, the collector's kid, the collector of oddities kids, and you're playing outside, and then you hear just creepy laughter coming from the garage anytime you go near it, or his wife, and you want to take him to court over it, potentially get a divorce. Like I don't blame her, because that would be terrifying if it's something that you're not expecting, or something that you didn't, mutually agree to accept. Because if you're not interested in the paranormal, or it genuinely scares you, like more so, I feel that would be incredibly problematic, like for her, and having to compromise and have him basically shrouded when he's not being viewed. But no, that really got me. But it's interesting to hear too that he started out as an actual dummy with a full body, at least from my understanding.
Actually, that was what I was wondering too, because I'm assuming it was a full dummy with a full body, but then I wondered, well, wait a second, he had very limited materials. What if it was always just a head? Like, how would he get... But also, like, you would think that if he had the ability, he would try and make some, small body for it. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I think I, like, assumed that it had a body of some kind at some point. But obviously there's no pictures of what it looked like in the 40s. But if it had a body, interesting to think about, like, well, what happened to it? Like, is it just, dissolving, degrading? And B, maybe it just never had a body and he just kind of had a head and maybe some sort of cloth, to be like clothing, and that could be possible too.
Yeah, that's the thing. It really leaves itself open for interpretation. And you know what? I should have been looking at the spot for his name because it was such a simple thing. Michael Diamond. Like he has like the perfect name for like a jewelry thief, but instead he collects oddities.
That's Michael Diamond.
And then
I also found it. I have, as we're talking about, I have the script open too, but yeah, they detail his his what's in his freak room, where he has like, shrunken heads and paraphernalia from executions, but then they also say, and then he also has an elephant-headed boy from Braiding Waxwork Museum.
Also, so it's like his freak room, and he happens to have handcuffs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he definitely has a cool collection. It makes sense that he wants this haunted dummy head to be in his collection, and I kind of understand the tension with his wife because, like, I don't know, I'm assuming quite a bit, but maybe he's like, hey, you knew into before this marriage started that I was into collecting weird and haunted items, but maybe he wasn't. Maybe they got together before. And she was like, how was I to know he was gonna start bringing haunted dummies into the household?
No, that's totally fair. But it's interesting though that he was able to get his hands on such unique curiosities. Like, I know I made a joke about the handcuffs, but the fact that he got a pair that belonged to Houdini is incredible.
Oh yeah, that's an amazing artifact right there.
But I do know, if I ever met this gentleman, I would have to ask him one question. I'd be like, what? Michael, how did you get your shrunken head?
Well, it's all detailed in a book written by my friend RL. I call him RL as he's my close and personal friend.
Oh man. But
the fact that they the children would hear the laughing, like that would do it for me. I'm surprised they're like, okay, we're gonna go outside, but just stay away from the shed. I would be like, I don't think I'm gonna go outside ever again.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty brave on their part, but it also makes you wonder if, like, Michael and his wife kind of had enough of the kids and were like, that's it, go outside, but stay away from our forbidden shed of mystery.
or maybe they think, could this count as a babysitter?
Oh my god, I would hope not. Well, I mean, if it is the spirit of Private Booth, I mean, technically it's a person, but I don't know. Like,
well, yeah,
you come anywhere near me, I'm gonna laugh at you, see?
We're assuming, maybe it's a spirit, and just to have it fit in this episode, it could be some other unknown curse. Like, I don't fully understand how haunted objects or haunted dolls or dummies work necessarily, but I know that some people view them as like cursed objects, like particularly Robert the doll, because he actually will curse people. Mm-hmm. There's nothing I read about Mr. Fritz doing it, and I do wonder if maybe Mr. Fritz is a more benign haunted dummy, because maybe the laughter is more jovial. Like, we hear laughing haunted dummy and we think it's like maniacal, like evil laughter, but maybe he's thinking on something funny and he's just he has the giggles, he can't hold it in, and it's only the source of the laughter which is freaking the kids out.
That's a really good point, because it never fully explains like what type of laughter it is. But hearing disembodied laughter with no physical source, especially
Oh,
for a child, I think would be terrifying.
that would take me out. Yeah, I would, especially knowing there's a dummy head, chock full of heady goodness in the shed. We're chalking this episode full of random Simpsons
And
lines.
Goosebumps references.
Probably getting a little too saturated with them, but I couldn't resist the heady goodness reference.
That's the thing. We got that a lot. Like when we were in the development of this episode, Cam sent me that quite a few times, but it's one of those things where like I see it and I just keep laughing every time. The shed has a head in it. Oh man. But no, like that is a really good point though. Not that there's a head in the shed, but the fact that the that the
Not the elf on the shelf, but the head in the shed.
head in the shed. Yeah. So they should do that for Halloween now.
Yeah.
Have head in the shed.
Well,
See,
there is a Christmas version. Like, if you remember from The Nightmare Before Christmas, I love the scene where Jack Skellington brought all the kids evil Halloween toys. So there's a scene where the mom is like, "Oh, honey, show us what Santa brought you," and then he just has a box and he pulls a severed head out of it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I love that scene. That's like my
forgot
favorite
about
part of
that.
the movie.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's an interesting tie-in too. But no, you're right. But like I mean, like the laughter, maybe it is. That's again why I think it might be the spirit of Private Booth, because maybe he's trying in a way to entertain himself and maybe entertain the kids the way that he would, because he was a ventriloquist before entering into the war. So
Yeah.
it might just be like a routine, and in the afterlife, because in a lot of cases, benign spirits, like they'll have ways to entertain themselves, I would feel, because it's got to be pretty lonely and monotonous if you wouldn't. And I mean, I take it from my own experience. There were things that I attribute to my dad's spirit. Like, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but when my brother and his wife had their son, they were living with us for a while, and my nephew was about 7 months old, I want to say, somewhere between like 6 months and a year. I can't remember the exact specifics, but my sister-in-law got a toy that had, it was it had an operated voice and had batteries in it. We didn't put the batteries in, and we had the toy sitting in a closet. It was wrapped, and yet it would go off with no batteries in it whatsoever. And it would, if you'd walk near it, you would literally hear this toy come to life and like start saying random letters and and like wanting you to engage with it. And I'm just like, well, how? There are no batteries in it.
That's pretty creepy, man.
Right. And then what got me was I checked the date, and it was January 20th. And for me, that's a very significant date because that's my dad's birthday.
Oh, it was doing it.
Yeah.
You noticed it on his birthday.
Yes.
Was it doing it on other dates as well?
I hadn't heard it on any other days. That was the only time that we had it. So that's why I was like, this is a very interesting tie-in.
That could be a sign from him in a way.
I would think so, because I never forget it. Like, I never forget his birthday. I acknowledge it every year. On my Facebook page, I have I do a song of the day. People ask me why I do a song of the day every day, and I always say it's because it's song of the day, but that's beside the point. But on January 20th, I'll look through the bands that I remember him liking when I was a kid, and usually put a song by one of them as a song of the day in his honor. So, when I read and hear the story of Fritz the Dummy and think about, the laughter in the shed, and with what you brought up now, that's the first thing I think of is, maybe he's just trying to do what he did in life, in the afterlife, which is entertain children through his act.
I think you're onto something there, because, like, in a way, this guy, Private Booth, he was very heroic. Like, that takes a lot of heroism to do something like that in such dire circumstances. he wanted to make people laugh. Nobody knew if they were ever going to get rescued, and unfortunately he didn't. And something inside of him must have figured out that, you know, we might as well make the most of the time that we have here. We might as well find some, you know, brief moments of joy here. And that was, you know, that tells me a lot about his character. Like, that's who he was as a person. That's what he decided to do. And he worked really hard gathering all the material to make the dummy head, and he crafted it really well with the limitations that he had. So like I don't, if the reason the dummy is still moving and laughing is because it's the spirit of Private Booth, I couldn't imagine it being malicious at all. And it would make sense that, you know, like the humor style in those days was very different. Like things that are considered creepy now were considered humorous then. Like they were just taken at face value. Like a lot of people genuinely found clowns and dummies like funny, but now there's this, you know, most people associate them with horror and being a bit frightening. But back then it was like, it made people laugh. So that's kind of my headcanon for what was going on with him.
No, that's totally fair. And I mean, the scary or quote unquote killer clown is an unfortunate narrative that we have. I know, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch it yet, but when I told you about the documentary Killer Legends, that's one of the stories that they cover. Actually, is a horrific train accident in 1918 in Illinois, and one of the things that really got to me for that was a man by the name of Joe Coyle was a clown that was very jovial and, you know, wore like bright colored clothing, because the way he viewed it was, hey, I'm on stage, I want to make sure the people in the back can see me and know what's going on. Right. But he had his whole family go with him on this traveling circus. It was going by train, and unfortunately the conductor of the train they were traveling on fell asleep and hit into a parked train. And it killed most of the people on board. Joe Coyle survived, but all of his family didn't. And for the rest of his career, he just performed in rags and was doing these sad and morose performances because he lost his family doing what he loved. So, you know, it's sad that something like, it's devastating that something like that could happen, but I can't blame him for changing his act. I don't mean to turn this into something negative by doing that, but it's kind of that same thing, and where that narrative of putting something sad or terrifying onto something that was originally starting out as innocent and humorous, that's actually where a lot of people think that started, would have been from that train crash and Joe Coyle from 1918.
I watched that documentary, but I didn't know that that's what some people had theorized was like the first inklings of the evil clown.
Not necessarily evil, but this one was more sad clown,
or like a sad clown or dark clown.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, with you being a comic book fan, the Joker would come to life for that too.
The Joker, Pennywise, even there's an episode of Seinfeld that didn't like scare me as a kid, but whenever I would watch it, there's a like kind of a sinister clown that's very creepy. And I don't know if you've ever seen this episode, but every time I would watch it, I would just get a bit uncomfortable because he is implied to be sinister in some way, not outright like doing crimes or anything, but there's a creepiness of him. You know, anyone who has seen that episode will know what I'm talking about.
That's totally fair. That's the thing. I'm not the right guy to talk to about Seinfeld.
I'm not also a big Seinfeld fan, but it was just constantly on in the 90s, early 2000s. So you would just watch it, you know, if nothing else was on at like 2 a.m. on Fox.
You are watching Fox.
We are watching Fox.
I know too, like obviously the the killer clown or the terrifying clown narrative, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, John Wayne Gacy and the unfortunate impact he had with that.
Oh yeah, that's
And
a
I
good
mean,
one.
one thing I thought was really interesting was a psychiatrist pointed out that if you look at him when he dressed up like Pogo the Clown, his facial features and the way that it was painted were pointed, whereas a normal clown, because they wouldn't want to come across as scary, would have more of a rounded look, so it didn't look
Yes.
so intimidating to children. So I just thought that little tidbit was always fascinating, and I don't know if it was like a conscious decision or just a subconscious way that he did his face paint, but I just always like took on such a terrible connotation for me when I first learned about the story. And
Hmm.
just before we go into story number 3, I actually have a bit of a tie-in
Yeah.
based on our discussion. So one of my favorite sitcoms is a show called News Radio, and
Classic.
right, and there's one episode actually where a guy dresses up as Santa Claus to get Bill McNeil, who's played by Phil Hartman's, attention. And he does it by saying, he was going to kill him every time they met in a lobby on the way up to the station. And
Whoa. That's kind. I kind
yeah,
of want to watch that episode now.
but it's that's the thing. Like the way they do it, it's like kind of funny and scary because of what unfortunately happened to Phil Hartman. But it ties in again to taking something that's supposed to be, you know, innocent and fun and magical and turning it into something scary, because it's basically the notion of a killer Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, I think most children in their really early years find Santa Claus very scary, and then the Christmas propaganda kind of gets to them around age 3 or 4, and then they start getting a bit more chill with him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a random dude that you don't know who's huge, and you're just told you must sit on him for a little bit.
Right?
And you're
And
like, what's
especially with
going on?
Stranger Danger, right?
Yeah.
uh,
But yeah, no, that's an interesting news radio connection. But yeah, maybe we should head off to story number 3, and then we'll meet the viewers slash listeners after that story.
Sounds good. So this is the third story. It's a story called The Curse of Atuk, which is a movie that was supposed to be released and based on a book. Unfortunately, 6 actors attached to the film died before it could be completed, which spawned an urban legend which was known as the Curse of Atuk. So I hope you guys enjoy this. And as Phil Hartman is a part of it, that's why I wanted to do that tie-in, because it just seemed to flow well with what we were talking about in the previous story. So here is The Curse of Atuk. In film, it is rather common for a novel to be adapted into a movie, and Atuk was no exception. What makes Atuk different, however, is that 6 actors attached to the film would die before its completion, spawning an urban legend known as the Curse of Atuk. Our story begins in 1963 with a novel titled The Incomparable Atuk, written by Jewish-Canadian author Mordecai Richler, which was about an Inuit man from Baffin Island who finds himself a transplant in Toronto, a true fish-out-of-water story. In the 1970s, a screenwriter named Todd Carroll began work on turning the novel into a film. Carroll presented his screenplay to Canadian director Norman Jewison, who, among other things, helped launch the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. The film adaptation differed from the novel in that rather than being from Baffin Island, Atuk would be a native of Alaska, and rather than being sent to Toronto, Atuk would be sent to New York. So far, Atuk seemed to be nothing more than a movie with a wacky comedic premise. However, Atuk would soon gain infamy, starting with the first actor to be offered the lead role. In 1982, John Belushi was attached to star as the lead in Atuk.
a script that Belushi appeared to show great interest in. Unfortunately, on March 5th of that same year, John Belushi was found dead in his hotel at the Chateau Marmont at the age of 33 from a drug-induced heart attack caused by a speedball, which was given to him by a woman named Catherine Evelyn Smith, who was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of John Belushi 2 months later. The Curse of Atuk had claimed its first victim. In 1986, actor and comedian Sam Kinison was attached to the project. Filming began in 1988. However, after only 8 days of filming, Kinison halted production, citing problems with the script, and began to rewrite the script himself, as Kinison was apparently given creative control over the project. This led to disagreements between Kinison and the studio, resulting in a lawsuit. Eventually, in 1992, production got underway once more. However, on April 10th of that same year, Sam Kinison was involved in a tragic automobile accident. Throughout his career, Sam Kinison was known for his drug and alcohol-fueled erratic behavior. At the time of the accident, though, Kinison was living a life of sobriety, only to have his life ended in a head-on collision with an intoxicated 17-year-old male. Sam Kinison was only 38 years old when he lost his life, and became the second victim of the Curse of Atuk. In spite of losing 2 lead actors, the production team was insistent to complete the film, as they strongly believed Atuk was something truly special. So, in 1994, John Candy was asked to play the lead role. Upon reading the script, Candy was thrilled with what he read, and eagerly began studying the script to prepare for the role. Sadly, however, while in Mexico on the set of another film, Wagons East, John Candy suffered a heart attack and died on the night of March 4th, 1994. He was just 43 years old, now the third victim attributed to the Curse of Atuk. Prior to his death, John Candy showed the script to a close friend, fellow actor MichaelO'Donague. O'Donague expressed interest in the script, with the hope of joining the cast alongside Candy. Sadly, this would not come to pass, not only due to the death of John Candy, but MichaelO'Donague himself, who had a history of migraines and died of a cerebral hemorrhage in November 1994, at the age of 54, a fourth victim of the Curse of Atuk. In 1997, the role of Atuk was offered to comedic actor Chris Farley. Farley became well aware of his idol John Belushi being originally attached to this role, and leapt at the chance to fill Belushi's shoes. However, in December of that same year, Chris Farley would die at the age of 33 from a drug overdose caused by a speedball, just as his idol did 15 years earlier. Chris Farley was victim number 5. Prior to his death, Chris Farley introduced the script to his friend, Phil Hartman. Tragically, 5 months after Farley's death, Phil Hartman would die. On May 28, 1998, Phil Hartman was fatally shot by his wife, Bryn, as he slept. Phil Hartman was 49 years old. Bryn turned the gun on herself, leaving 2 children without a mother or father. Drugs also played a part in the death of Phil Hartman, as Bryn had cocaine, alcohol, and antidepressants in her system at the time of her and Phil's deaths. The Curse of Atuk had claimed its final victim. To this day, the script for Atuk remains untouched. It is uncertain if the movie will ever see a release. At this point, with the script attached to the deaths of 5 actors, should it? While each death can be explained, one can't help but see the eerie coincidences surrounding these deaths linked to what should have been a fish out of water comedy.
And we are
back.
Oh, sorry.
Everything's stereo. It's all good.
We
Okay,
are both
so
back.
we have returned. The Mill and the Cam said it at the same time, so you got it from both sides this time. It's special.
You did, yeah.
Okay. So what are your thoughts upon reading / hearing The Curse of Atuk?
Well, it's a very interesting story, and I think the first thing I noted was, I need to read more Mordecai Richler, because I was a big Jacob Tutu fan as a kid, and he's famously the writer of the Jacob Tutu series, including Jacob Tutu and the Hooded Fang. But he's also a well-known Canadian author of Jewish descent, and he's obviously wrote many novels for adults as well as children. And I hadn't heard of the incomparable Atuk, but it sounds like it was a book that, gosh darn it, people wanted to make it into a movie, so it must have been a really good story.
So it's funny that we have different opinions on Mordecai Richler, because it's not his fault. Okay?
Oh wait, are you a beefer with Mordecai?
Not a beefer with him per se, but one particular book, and it's because I had to read it, and I could not get into it, and it's because I think I was forced to read it in grade 11. I had to read The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, and I just was not a fan of that book at all.
Oh.
And again, I think it's because I was forced to read it. It was kind of the same problem I had in grade 12 when I had to read The Great Gatsby. Like, I just found both books so boring that I could not get into them. And
you know what? I also found Gatsby horribly boring, and I felt like it also was really overhyped as a story. Mm-hmm. Works okay as a movie. It's like a fine story in movie form, but I'm a book reader, so I can enjoy a slower book, but I just wasn't connecting with it.
But that's the thing, you'll get that. I've had certain books where I did connect with them. A few of them that I can cite off the top of my head were Of Mice and Men. I enjoyed the book and the movie, even though the movie rushes the finale in such a way that you can't help but laugh. At least I can't. If you've ever seen it and compared it to the book, because so in the book Of Mice and Men, they really draw out this horrible decision that the lead character has to make, because the premise, if you're not familiar, is these two guys are on a ranch. One of them they're both ranch hands, and one of them is special needs, and the other one is basically a friend / caretaker for the special needs person. But everywhere they go, the special needs character winds up getting them both in trouble, not intentionally, but he basically winds up getting them in trouble, so they have to keep leaving from ranch to ranch. And then right at the end, unfortunately, the special needs character gets in trouble one last time, and there's nowhere for them to run anymore. So the caretaker makes a decision where, hey, I either let this guy suffer a violent death by being murdered by a lynch mob, or I take him out myself, and that way he doesn't suffer. So that's what he does. So in the book, it's all drawn out, and you're really feeling for both of them, because the special needs character doesn't know what's going on. His name's Lenny, and then the main character George knows what he has to do, and he just he's contemplating it, and it's very cathartic, right? But then in the movie, it's rushed. So they have this scene throughout the movie and the book where George will say to Lenny, they'll talk about a place where they're tending rabbits and having their own farm where they have this idyllic place for both of them to live. And Lenny will always say, "Tell me again about the rabbits, George." And in the movie, it's literally, "Tell me again about the rabbits," and then he gets shot. So it's done so quickly that I can't help but laugh, because it's not, it doesn't do the book the same disservice. You know what I mean? It's just so rushed that it almost sounds hilarious, because it just does not give the moment that they were capturing.
I'm realizing, I was remembering that I had seen the movie years ago, and this is the movie that Looney Tunes actually referenced this a lot.
That is dark. Jeez.
She didn't
There
know
would be
that.
like a character that was like kind of very big and hulking and kind of more dim-witted, and you'd be like, "What's going on, George?" And it was like a whole reference to this, which was a very well-known reference back in the day when Looney Tunes was in its heyday.
Yeah.
But it was a really good movie, but I had nothing to compare it to. And yeah, I do remember the ending kind of just, it didn't mull around with, him contemplating what to do. And, it was just kind of like, yeah. It's
And
always,
that's what I say.
yeah, it's an interesting experience comparing a movie that you just watched to a book that you spent more time with.
But that's why I say, like, the apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz just wasn't for me. It has nothing to do with the author. It's just when you're forced to read a book, if you're not into it, it's very hard to get into it. But
Would you have preferred the apprenticeship of Lenny Kravitz, or?
I mean, probably, because that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, apparently he's an interesting fellow. But okay, not to get on like tangent within tangent or tangentception, if you will. Just to get back to this. Yeah. So, one thing I did notice. They sure wanted to hire a lot of white actors to play Atuk, which is, I guess, one of those unfortunate things they just did back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. But it really does jump out at you that it's like, okay, a lot of, Rubenesque white men portraying this indigenous guy. I wouldn't want anyone new to be cursed by this, but if they were to make this movie, you would hope that, currently they would find an indigenous actor to play him, or specifically an
Inuit actor, yeah. Because it makes me wonder if that might tie into the curse, right? Because if they're taking people who are Caucasian and saying, hey, you're going to play an Inuit, then, that might potentially lead to that and upset, indigenous spirits potentially, because it does come across as very it almost comes across as like racially motivated, because it's okay, we'll give these Caucasian actors makeup and try to make them look indigenous rather than hiring an actual indigenous actor, which there are many who are fantastic, by the way.
100%.
And it's that's kind of one of the points that I thought of when I was writing this. And it's also weird too, because like I was talking to friends about it, and one of them actually brought up that it's interesting that every single person who was tied to this movie was also on Saturday Night Live at a time.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. Like, everyone here is a comedian, and that's just how things worked back then. But I guess the only person I didn't recognize was O'Donague, Michael O'Donague. Maybe I should look into who he was, but everyone else I knew from their work, but I didn't know him.
That's fair. He was part of the Saturday Night Live cast, I believe, in the early 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. So around the time of Belushi, or maybe shortly afterward. I'm not I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of Saturday Night Live and like when it ran and who the casts were, unless they were seasons that I had followed. So I wasn't overly familiar with Michael O'Donague either, but I did know that he had a Saturday Night Live connection based on videos I had seen and other things like this. Also, I want to give a shout out to the fantastic podcast / YouTube channel Bedtime Stories for covering this and first bringing it to my attention, because I loved it. And anybody who knows me, I mentioned news radio. I quote The Simpsons all the time, and like Phil Hartman was one of my favorite comedic actors ever. So,
yeah,
I wanted to do this story because it did mention him. Ultimately, that's the story that impacted me the most, because they're all unfortunate, but in some of the cases, especially with John Belushi and Chris Farley, they more or less controlled
what happened to them. I'm not saying they aren't like the stories aren't tragic, because they are, but Sam Kinison, for example, too, he, overcame his demons only to be hit by a drunk driver after being, recovering from alcoholism. And then Phil Hartman, who did not use drugs, he unfortunately lost his life to the person that, you would think would love and care about you the most. But obviously, Bryn Hartman had her own issues with substance abuse, and it led to that. But it was all just, again, very interesting and sad that they all met their fate when being attached to this movie, and relatively within a short period of time each time. It was either within the same year or the year after at most.
And everyone died very young, and in radically different ways. Like, the only connection might be John Belushi and an overdose from a woman, and I guess Phil Hartman and his wife, but like,
well, actually, the biggest connection would be Belushi and Chris Farley, because they died basically from the same method and at the same age.
Oh, actually, the speedball. Yeah. So, like, there are some connections, but it's also a very diverse way, that they all unfortunately died. Like, it was just cardiovascular, like John Candy. I think of all the people listed here, I'm the biggest John Candy fan. Love that guy. Actually just watched a movie with him recently, and yeah, he died at 43. He was so young.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And I know too, like, I hadn't been overly familiar. I can't believe I have to tie this in with my ex, but that's kind of where we're at. But she did show me the movie Uncle Buck, and I actually really enjoyed it. That movie was great. And
that's a great one.
and you can see just, John Candy and Chris Farley, they had that kind of larger than life. Like, I'm not doing that to make fun of their weight, but their persona and like their presence in these movies, and just their elements of, physical comedy or just very witty line delivery that I've kind of enjoyed from both. So if you have any other John Candy recommendations that I should check out, like, I honestly will, because I enjoyed what I saw.
4 words for you, dude: planes, trains, and automobiles.
Sounds good. I'll do that too. Maybe I should watch it before I take a plane.
You definitely should. It's also a great Steve Martin movie. I just watched Canadian Bacon for the first time, which I'd never seen. And that's a solid one. I don't think it's like his best ever, but I liked it. It was very cutting political satire, and he's great in anything. If he's there briefly, as he is in like Home Alone, where he's not like a main focus, but he's great in it, or even like Spaceballs as Barf the dog, the dog man. He's great.
Well, I should watch Spaceballs, honestly. I've been meaning to, but I never did, just because, again, I'm very behind the times when it comes to movies, just because I've gravitated more toward music, just because of the fact that, I'm visually impaired. But I should honestly do that. But it just, it gets me that, every person in this movie did seem genuinely excited about it. And, before they were able to get any further, it seems like, at least from the research that I've done, the one who got closest was Sam Kinison. But then he gave up because he just wasn't happy with the script and wanted to rewrite it. But the problem with Sam at that time in the 1980s was he was heavy into substances, whether it be alcohol, whether it be, illicit drugs, what have you. So part of me wonders, like, I'm speculating. Okay, I'm going to make that clear. I'm speculating. But for Sam Kinison, part of me wonders if, like, he may have been on something, read the script, and in that altered state was like, nope, I don't like this. I'm going to do it my way. And then when they reconvened, when he was sober and they went to start shooting, that's unfortunately when his accident occurred. And again, with him, if you've never seen his stand-up, like, it's one of the most... Right.
I'm a big Sam Kinison fan as well. Like, it might be that, like, he's a very different style of humor than the others. Like he's like angry humor.
And it's just that manic energy
Yeah.
for him on stage. You know, it takes a special person to make screaming like a maniac funny. But he was able to do it.
Oh yeah.
And like this ties in too, because like this people in the listeners in the States would have this through Vice. We in Canada get it through Crave. I get it through Crave thanks to this gentleman that I'm speaking with, and I'm thankful for that. But
you are welcome.
but they have the dark side of comedy, and Phil Hartman was covered in an episode, Sam Kinison was covered in another. So I had more of an understanding of their backstories when I went into this. And again, it just makes it so much sadder that this movie that does seem kind of like, at least to me, it would be like maybe a B-level comedy, you know, the fish out of water story potentially, just caused so much tragedy all in one film that's never been completed.
Yeah, and on the surface it seems like a pretty benign movie, and that's why, that's where my skepticism of Curses comes in. Like, do I think this could all be a coincidence? Yes, definitely. But do I think they should just stop trying to make this movie? Also, yes.
Exactly.
I think like if I was an actor, I would not really want this script to make it to my desk. So there's still that superstition in me where it's like there's something about this, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm getting really tinfoil hat here, but maybe Mordecai Richler was based it on a real guy and didn't credit him, and the real Atuk is like, I'm going to curse every friggin' person.
There could be that too. Yeah. But I also look at it as the change, right? Like the original book has it as an Inuit who is Canadian from Baffin Island, who then gets transplanted to Toronto and is the fish out of water. But then when the script gets handed over and it gets turned into a movie, they say, oh, no, we're going to make him from Alaska, and then we're going to have him go to New York.
We're going to cast Chris Farley, who's as blonde and I think blue-eyed as you can get.
Right?
Yeah. And we love Chris Farley, but like, was there nobody else that, like, Graham Greene was right there.
That's what I was gonna say. Graham Greene would have been perfect, honestly.
Graham Greene is amazing, and I believe he could have done a perfect job.
Yeah, and it messes with my mind still to this day. Okay, to this day, even though it's almost 30 odd years later, that the same man who narrated Exhibit A, which was one of my favorite crime shows that we got up here in Canada because it was on TLC and A&E, I believe. Or no, sorry, Discovery Channel. It was on Discovery. No, I remember that now. It was on Discovery. And also was the same guy who voiced the crabby tree from Dudley the Dragon. It's just so weird.
So, funny story about that is, like, I was a big fan as a kid of Dudley the Dragon, and I really liked the crabby tree. So whenever there would be a movie with Graham Greene, growing up, my mom would be like, hey Cam, it's the crabby tree from Dudley the Dragon. I'd be like, yeah, I love that guy.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, that's why I say, like, it really saddened me when I found out he passed away last year, because he, like, if you were to watch Exhibit A, the only drawback to it that I have is that show has all these cases covered, but the victims' names are changed, so it has that bit of a lack of authenticity. Like, the cases are real, but they changed the names of the victims. I guess they had to because of the parameters maybe on Discovery. I'm not sure, but he does tell it very well. He had a fantastic voice for narration, and like there were even some pretty witty moments, with these like very serious crimes that he would sprinkle in, and I always appreciated that. because he had a very unique style to his delivery, and like I loved it. And then again, I have to bring this up with my ex once more because she is a huge movie buff. But we watched another movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it was had Graham Greene in it, and he was playing as a sheriff, and it was like these investigations into a potential serial killer of Indigenous women. And he was talking to one of the guys in the show, like another character, and the character was like spouting off and just saying, it's my dad's in prison, and literally Graham Greene's character, without skipping a beat, goes, I know, I put him there.
That's a cold line.
Right? But it was like done with such kind of like sarcastic delivery that like couldn't help but laugh.
He's popped up just in quite a few things over the years, and he's always great in whatever he's in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, rest in peace, Graham Greene, as well. But yeah, I guess maybe before we wrap up, you heard my verdict on my thoughts on the Curse of Atuk, leaning towards maybe coincidence, but still not, gonna pin my life on that. But how about yourself? Do you feel, like what percentage of the way sure do you feel about this being a curse?
That's the thing. I would go, if you want me to do actual percentages, even though my math can never be trusted because blind guys are terrible at math. But
I don't know if that's a trope, man. Maybe you're just terrible at math.
Okay, this blind guy's terrible at math. Fine.
Maybe in school it's like show your work, and it's like, yeah, I can't.
Actually, okay. I just quick tangent because this is actually really funny. I was talking to my son about school, and he brought up this thing where he got in trouble for doing this. But if I was a teacher, I would have at least given him partial marks. He was doing a math problem, and it said, "Show your work," or show your thoughts, I think is what it said. So he literally drew a brain with like a thought bubble above it. And his teacher got mad, and they said, well, why did you do that? And my son, without skipping a beat, was like, you said to show your thoughts.
You should have clarified.
Right? So like, I love that. Like, coming up from an 11-year-old, that was one of the funniest things I've heard in a long time. Oh man, that cracked me up. I loved it. But seriously, my thoughts would be, the reason why I kind of lean 60-40 toward this being a curse is that one death, okay, that's tragic. 2 deaths, okay, like, it's kind of weird. It is a bit of a coincidence. But when you get up to 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's where I'm like, okay, there's something to this. It is a coincidence, definitely. I can't argue that. But the simple fact that the script was viewed or passed through the hands of these 6 individuals, and they all died shortly after that script came into contact with them, does, to me at least, lend credence to it being a potential curse. Because if it had just, like, as an example, I'll isolate, okay? Like, if it was just John Belushi and Chris Farley, I would be on board with you 100%, because they died the same way, they died the same age, and they were, one was the idol of the other, because John Belushi was Chris Farley's idol, right?
Right.
But the fact that there were 4 other deaths linked to it is where I'm like, I don't really want anybody else to get their hands on it, especially if it's an actor that I'm a fan of. I want them to be around for as long as possible and making, as much compelling TV or movie appearances that they can. So at least that's where I stand on it. But I leave that question to the listeners as well. Do you side with me? Do you side with Cam? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Or do you have your own theory? Please feel free to share that in the comments, because we will get down in there and mix it up. If you see somebody that types as visually impaired gamer 1987, that's me from my separate channel, as Cam is gracious enough to run the YouTube channel on our side for Milcam. But definitely, I hope that you guys enjoyed the stories. As we're recording this, it's in the morning, so I'll say this morning, but whenever you watch. And we will be back next month with what I think is going to be a live
broadcast, at least for the discussion portion, because I'll be in Toronto, so I'm really looking forward to that. And we'll see if it has a different dynamic.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. It won't be virtual, separated by distance. Yeah, we can do it in person, and I'm looking forward to that, man.
Me too.
But yeah, we'll let people have a discourse in the comments about what they think about all three curses. And yeah, I think now's a good point to end the podcast episode. And yeah, we'll see everyone back in a month.
Yeah, and we have to end the podcast because this podcast is cursed. That's bad.
And we killed the podcast because it was haunted.
Hopefully not.